Hello there, and welcome to today's pause. As always, I am so glad that you're here. And as always, before we do anything else, before we talk, before we reflect, before we try to understand anything, let's begin where we always begin, by allowing ourselves to just arrive here. So I want you to really find yourself in a comfortable position. Whatever that means to you, ideally it's seated. It might be walking. And if you're seated, right, and if you're walking even, just allow the body to just be with that, in that movement, in that stillness. We can settle into the ground under our feet. We can settle into the chair supporting our structure. And the first thing I always ask you to do is just to feel that which is supporting you. And if you haven't done so already, and it's safe for you to do so, just close the eyes. Soften your gaze and take a nice slow breath in, a nice slow full breath, and then a nice slow full breath out. Again, as you're ready, fully inhale, and then a long, easy exhale. And just notice that chair beneath you, the floor supporting your feet. And know that in this moment, if there is nothing else that you do here, which is fine, just know that you're not holding everything up by yourself. You are supported. You are upheld. Wonderful. And today I wanted to share what I've been thinking a lot about over the past week or so, is really the why we are here, the why I do this weekly contemplation called the pause, because I think it's really important to understand why we pause. And I think it's really interesting that we often use it to give ourselves space to think harder. You know, when we're facing a difficult problem or decision, or, you know, you're trying to figure something out, we can pause to analyze it more, to think it through, to allow the pieces to come together, to make up our mind, or even craft our response. And all of those can be really helpful. But I've noticed something really curious. Sometimes the harder I try to think my way toward a solution, the further away it can actually feel or seem. It's almost as though the seeking itself, well, it just creates more noise, a little bit more chaos. But to contrast, when my mind becomes still, when I become still, and I give myself room to breathe, the mind begins to soften a little bit. Some of the urgency can settle if we let it. And then from that quieter place, that's actually where I most often discover what it was that I was looking for. And it's there that I start to realize, well, it wasn't actually hidden at all. And it certainly wasn't in kind of doing more or looking for more. It's just that in the chaos that was happening around me and in my mind, possibly, it just wasn't possible to see the answer. And I wonder if you've ever noticed that too. Maybe the answer wasn't missing, it was simply invisible. And I think the distinction here, and I think it's an important distinction, is that often we pause so we can stop the noise around us and just really think. And I've definitely used words or phrases like, just give me a minute, let me think. And perhaps instead the pause exists so we don't have to. And especially when we're stressed, our minds become very busy. The mind will scan, it searches, it's trying to protect us. It's trying to create the solution for us. It scans every possibility, and they all feel equally important, equally worthy of consideration. Every decision becomes urgent, it feels urgent. And all the problems feel like they need to be solved immediately. And so the mind and the nervous system are just doing what they're designed to do, right? To keep us safe. But the difficulty is that when everything feels equally urgent, it's really hard to know what actually deserves our attention. Right? And so the mind begins to really work on that puzzle, doesn't it? Which one, which idea, which thought? How do we piece it all together? And the image that comes to mind for me anyway, besides the puzzle pieces, is it's like trying to look into a pond or a body of water when it's all stirred up or when it's really murky. When it's all gunk and mud, right? You can't see anything. Everything seems, right? You're like scanning through, trying to make sense of what's seaweed, what's a rock, what's a shell, what's a fish, what's a turtle, what's muck, what's a boot. But the truth is, the water itself hasn't lost its clarity. It's just all the matter stirred up in it that is making it cloudy. And so the answer that you might be looking for, the thing that you might be looking for, is still in there somewhere. You just can't see it. And this is why I think especially we sometimes misunderstand the purpose of the pause. We don't pause to become more focused on solving the problem or to become a better problem solver. We actually pause to stop stirring the water, to allow the mud to settle. Because the clarity that you're seeking for in that moment, especially looking into that mucky pond, the clarity that you're seeking, you can't create, right? You can't create. The clarity that you're seeking only happens when there's a bit of stillness. That's when that which you're seeking for, that is when it becomes uncovered. And, this is a very real practice, a very true practice, and it happens with me and for me again and again. This week, in fact, I found myself thinking about how that plays out in my own life. There were several conversations that happened this week that I hadn't planned. Well, in fact, I would correct that. I had actually planned them. I had thought about, what am I going to talk about? What am I going to say? What questions do I want to ask? I had those kind of working in my mind. But when I remained open and receptive and allowed the flow of the relationship, the conversation to unfold, well, then a coffee chat, led to an unexpected referral conversation. In another situation, it led to ideas that neither of us had considered before. And while I had a plan, an idea in mind for how those conversations would go, what I wanted to talk about, it's, to be prepared. The outcomes didn't happen because I sat at my desk trying to invent them. They emerged because there was enough space for something different to appear. And it reminded me again that space is rarely empty. Space is where the possibility arises and where it lives. And I think too often we become afraid of that little space, right? So we go to work on the problem in our mind, or, if our schedule unexpectedly opens, we rush to fill it in, right? We look for ways to be productive. When there's silence, right? What do? We reach for our phone, we pop in a podcast, we get to work on something else, because empty space can feel really uncomfortable. It interrupts momentum. And yet, what if the very thing we're trying to fill is exactly the place where that next insight will appear? So this week, as your week unfolds, instead of asking yourself, how do I solve this? You might ask yourself instead, where can I shift into a little bit of stillness? Where can I pause? And those questions feel very different, right? They create more room. And so let's practice that together now. I want you to, where you are, and this is very similar to how we started, but just, let your hands rest comfortably and bring your attention to those places where you are supported. Your feet on the floor, your feet touching the ground. The back of the chair, the seat of the chair. Let your arms rest comfortably where they may. You take a breath and just notice, or maybe connect with, where can you soften a little bit more into that support? And then what might happen, or what you might notice, is how your mind begins to immediately fill in those gaps, those spaces. And you might even notice that your mind might begin to pick up again and start to work on that problem you're trying to solve. And if that happens, that's okay. It's just trying to do its job. And all you need to do is simply bring your attention back to the points of contact between you and that which is supporting you. And then notice your breath. A slow inhale, a long, easy exhale. And then each time you practice this, and it is a practice, but each time you do, then the grip of the problem softens just a little bit more. And with each exhale, that water becomes just that little bit clearer. And not because you're forcing it, but because you've stopped stirring it. The breath slows, the body softens, the nervous system settles, and perhaps without asking anything of yourself, you simply become more available to whatever it is that wants to emerge. And maybe nothing changes right now, and that's okay. But perhaps rest in the assurance that at the very least, your body, your energy, your nervous system has settled. And the problem of the day may still be there, but what you've created within, that too is a form of clarity. Because it's in there that your natural wisdom and intuition can arise. And I want you to know that you can trust that your next step will be one based on greater clarity because you've practiced, and greater clarity than before you paused. So as we finish our time together today, I'd love to leave you with this thought to take into the week ahead. We don't pause so we can think harder. We pause to stop the stirring of the water. And we pause so we can hear ourselves again. So until next time, my friends, I thank you for choosing to spend a bit of time with me today. And as always, take a few minutes after this video ends. You don't have to rush away. You can linger here. Notice how you feel. And when you are ready, you can carry this little bit of calm with you into whatever comes next in your day. And until next time, my friends, I wish you a beautiful day. Namaste.